I do not own any of the media shown in this video. All rights belong to Hasbro, DreamWorks, Transformers, Michael Bay and others etc. If I am required to, I will delete this video. Let me know if I have to. Thank you. This is a video attempting to explore where the age of extinction Autobots, Drift, Hound, Crosshairs, could have been before the events of the fourth film. And I must say this video will use some of the comics as reference. I got these comics from someone who posted them and other info online, and I got one from someone who publicly posted it, because I honestly don't even know where to purchase these. So while I did all of this research on my own, I couldn't have done it without. Thank you. Appreciate it. This will also reference The Binder of Revelation, a book which contains info about general Transformers universe media primarily aligned continuity. When it comes to these comics in the Binder of Revelation book, I will be using 4 images from the Binder of Revelation book, and a few panels from the Titan movie tie-in comics, which is for Drift and Crosshairs. Again, please let me know if I am not allowed to use or showcase these. Like said before, if I have to, I will delete this video. Just please, warn me first. I am certainly aware that thanks to some of the comics not aligning with the movies, a lot of them are widely considered non-canon, but I will explain why I will be using them. Now let's begin. Throughout the first 3 films, Crosshairs, Drift and Hound are nowhere to be seen. At first glance, we have no idea what they'd even been doing before the events of Age of Extinction. While the in-universe reason would be much different, I am aware the real world, outside reason was very much likely because these characters hadn't been fully recognized yet. Let's start with Drift using his character profile bio, from the Binder of Revelation, which is the same book that offers info for the other 2 bots. Drift used to be a Decepticon, but changed himself using technology from a hidden, ancient sect of Cybertronians known as the Circle of Light that turned him from Deadlock to Drift. For a long time since, he'd wandered the galaxy to free planets that were still subjugated despite the Cybertronian peace treaty. But the sequence of these events initially appears as unclear. All we know is that it was before the events of AOE so far, neither do we know when he came to Earth. Some of the information on Drift's bio also does not logically apply to the bayverse. The bio mentions a Cybertronian peace treaty, but there was never shown or implied to be such a thing in the bayverse. A group called the Circle of Light also appears to exist. There seems to be a bit of inconsistency, but a reliable piece of this is that it indeed makes it known that Drift had been a former Decepticon. Although one thing for sure is Drift never freed planets under subjugation like the book claimed. This generally aligns with his comic, which takes place after the events of DOTM. Optimus and Drift go to the wreckage of the Ark to make sure nothing dangerous had survived it. It reveals Drift had a Decepticon friend in the past. The 2 were working alongside Lockdown, who was a Decepticon at one point, which led to an incident. Drift's backstory on Cybertron had been 5 years ago before the comic's present day. Going off of the Binder of Revelation that stated AOE's events were in 2017, this would mean the events of DOTM had taken place in 2012 because AOE takes place 5 years after DOTM. As for Drift's comic, we do not know exactly how soon after these events that it takes place. All we know is this comic had to take place after 2012, maybe 2013. That means said incident with Lockdown would have at least occurred after 2007 or later. As a result of everything, we now know he became an Autobot fairly recently, at least after 2007 at a bare minimum. But we do not know if he became one during either of the first 3 movies or right after DOTM. If it were true that he became an Autobot immediately before or during the events of the first 3, the reason he didn't participate would likely be that he'd been busy. If he became one after DOTM, it'd explain why he didn't participate, as there'd be no reason to assume he had any form of communication with the Autobots during DOTM or before. The inconsistencies with this comic appear to be that Lockdown apparently worked with the Decepticons at one point according to this comic, which is never stated or implied in the movie. In this comic, Optimus is wearing his concept art knight form, which is odd considering he didn't get this type of design until AOE events. There seemingly isn't a true explanation for this other than for artistic, maybe even marketing purposes. Drift's design is slightly different, though generally resembling his usual one. It doesn't matter since Drift could have changed his form a bit after becoming an Autobot. In case you must be reminded, what must be remembered is that the tie-in comics were meant to be connected to the movies, hence the tie-in part. These comics, at one point, even now, help to answer questions that we didn't get answered going off of just the movies alone. Errors do not always indicate non-canon, but sometimes they can result in it being non-canon. That's why specific pieces of information must align with what is presented in the movies, and why we should assume everything is canon, since it's intended to be, as long as, again, it does not contradict what is established in the movies. And if they ever do, it really depends on what it is, such as an inconsistent character design versus an inconsistency in the timeline. Regardless of how inconsistent one might say Lockdown's origin in this comic could be, and how Drift's character bio is inconsistent with the peace treaty statement existing. One thing that remains consistent for Drift's side of the story is that he was a Decepticon before, something stated time and time again. These are still canon. I realized in Crosshairs' bio, Crosshairs is the only one out of the three who's been stated to have came to Earth after the events of Dark of the Moon, then went into hiding with the others. His bio also mentions having seen that there was no hope of ever returning to Cybertron. This implies that he was not on Cybertron before he came to Earth, which is obvious since it pretty much got destroyed when being transported to Earth in DOTM, and he was obviously not on Earth either. In his comic, he's stated that he's a new Autobot. Unlike Drift, we don't get an exact idea of what Crosshairs was doing before he came to Earth, but at the same time, we at least generally know when he became an Autobot. In said comic, he is told by Optimus that he is now combat ready. He calls himself a new Autobot, indicating he'd been new to the faction. This alone does not imply Crosshairs is a stranger to war, but rather that being a new Autobot requires learning their tactics and demonstrating his expertise. Optimus and Bumblebee are using designs they hadn't until the events of AOE, and Crosshairs also has a slightly different look. But as explained before, whether this is an error or an universe reason, it doesn't mean anything can't be used. The comic is still canon to the movies. Regardless, Crosshairs wasn't on Earth and was not an Autobot until sometime after DOTM's events, and so it is reasonable to believe he had no form of shared resources or any form of communication with the Autobots, let alone knew where they were, which would explain why he did not participate in any of the wars in the first 3 movies. Something that also really caught my eye is how this bio mentioned that he'd started forging friendships with Hound and Drift, which he seemingly just only started soon after he came to Earth. Whether this could also indicate he just met them only after he arrived to Earth or not is up for debate, and although I do believe he could have known about them before Cybertron fell, one thing we know for sure is that they just then started becoming friends upon his Earth arrival. As for where Crosshairs was before he came to Earth and became an Autobot, my theory is that he directly saw Cybertron implode on itself, which makes sense. Moving on to Hound, it states he came to Earth early after it was discovered. We know he's been an Autobot since the Cybertron War days, has fought in several wars, that he's went on solo missions and even helped Crosshairs, along with being an Autobot for longer than Crosshairs, and presumably training Crosshairs to be an Autobot and befriending him. In Hound's bio, he was explicitly stated to have been called to Earth, having came to it early after its discovery. If this was referring to his arrival after 2007, then why didn't he participate in the other battles prior to Age of Extinction? The movies shows on several occasions that Hound has comms with the Autobots as a whole, and it's even obvious in his bio, which is why he even came to Earth. Well, the bio does indeed state he'd been on solo scouting missions, so maybe not all Autobots were available to participate in every battle, because these bots are busy taking care of missions that could help ensure their victory and survival against their enemies, or even guarding allies. Now, everything seems to be explained, but with the last night comes something interesting. Now hold it, I know this might sound alarming. I am fully aware that in context of the movie this scene basically retconned a lot of things, such as most of the Autobots first arriving on Earth in 2007, overall a pretty huge mess in the timeline. Nothing for this is explained in the movie. It was very strange. However, I wonder what this could add, and so let's see. Historic photos show that Hound was on Earth since before the World War II era, and Drift on Earth in medieval Japan. With Hound being shown in these history photos, it gives his bio a different context on when he arrived. Arriving early after Earth's discovery now could have been anywhere far before 2007. Regardless of whatever time frame he'd arrived then or after 2007, he'd have still been on solo scouting missions during times that we'd never seen him, as nothing implies this doesn't remain true about his bio. As for Drift, the photo does not tell us if he was an Autobot during this time frame either. Regardless of if Drift arrived on Earth before or after 2007, one thing we still know for sure is he had to have became an Autobot after 2007. Crosshairs is not shown in any of the historic photos or paintings, which is surprisingly consistent with the official sources and strengthens the already proven claim that he didn't come to Earth until after the events of DOTM. Again, TLK's historic documentation regarding Drift and Hound could be canon, but like said before, it doesn't appear to offer anything meaningful. So regardless of if TLK is used as a basis or not, the timeline for all three of the Autobots remains consistent. All in all, these three have had quite an interesting history.